Good morning everybody and welcome to another live tutorial. Really good to have you here. Happy New Year everybody. Hope you guys are wonderful. Started your new year with a big bang. Now, thank you for tuning in. Today what I will be doing is a monochromatic landscape using two simple things. Tea lights, of course, everyone's got tea lights at home, and one acrylic color, which in this case is black. So we're creating a monochromatic landscape. Now, of course, I promised everybody that I was going to do this painting on the floor. I did test it out, and there's just too much dust that is affecting the painting, so I thought, no, I'm keeping it the traditional way. So we're going on to an easel that you see behind me. Of course, the landscape today is all about simple ideas, and I really want to encourage you guys to, continue to focus on shapes, contours and lines. It really is all about that. You really do need to watch this video because one, it is incredibly simple, and it will give you, I'm sure it will give you an incredible inspiration to be able to begin something in your own studios once this video is over. And if we have never met before, of course, my name is Mirjana Persakis, full-time artist. I love painting portraits and painting people amongst, of course, other genres like your still life and your landscapes, but I do love painting people and meeting new people. And most of all, what I do love is doing these videos, because I truly believe that when you inspire and you light the fire within an art gangster, which I know is inside of everybody, you create a world of happy, creative, joyful people. And it is my absolute pleasure to be doing these videos for you. So again, I thank you all for tuning in. And of course, if you find any of this information useful, please comment down below. Maybe include someone's name in the comments below that you think could be inspired, that could begin their 2018 year with a bang, with a bit of excitement and something different, or perhaps that they need a different perspective, something lively in their life that will perhaps give them a new step forward. So please do comment below. And of course, I'm incredibly excited to begin this year with something fun and something unique for everybody out there. And I hope to be, a regular artist that comes and presents inside the comfortability of your living room. Now, of course, if this information does resonate, I'd love to know, and give me one of those big wow faces. I love seeing that as well, and let me know what you guys think and the biggest tip that you found in today's video. So today, by the way, is really as simple as it gets, and I'm going to bring you and show you my bucket of tea lights. How I'm going to incorporate tea lights into this artwork. Well, you're going to have to tune in and watch in a couple of seconds. Okay, now let's begin. When you look around you, of course, what you start to see are objects. Now those objects are predicated by two simple factors: their dark shadows and their light shadows. The contour of the objects around us gives its communication or speaks directly to our brain, which is how we then convert if that object is round, square, elongated, etc. And the contour of its dark shadow and light shadow tells us, how far away it is from us, at the same time the shape that it occupies. So that's really important to know. And of course, if you're looking at a subject, the other tip that I always tell all my students is to not focus on the individual subject matter. For example, if you're going outside and painting a landscape, you're not going to paint every blade of grass that you see. Rather, you take this big holistic viewpoint and start to look at the shape that it occupies. And when you squint your eyes, which is why artists have these beautiful, lovely lines around their eyes, when you squint your eyes, what you're starting to see is that all the detail disappears, and you're now breaking down that object, that subject that you're looking at. In this case, the example that I'm giving is grass, into a big shape. So squinting really reduces the detail and focuses more on the contour, line work, light and shade, tonal work, which is how I then interpret and start to paint. Okay, so let's begin. Now I'm going to turn you guys to this a small prep canvas that I've already got in actual fact, so it's paper, and then I'm going to show you how the tea lights actually work. Now the reason why I'm using tea lights, because today I'm using acrylics, is because the tea light will act as a masking fluid. So for everybody out there that is interested in painting in acrylics or watercolors, you can go out into an art shop and purchase masking fluid. But of course, if you're wanting to begin to learn first and foremost, it's really important to, you know, cut down on your cost and begin to understand your mediums before you go and start investing in really good and expensive materials. Now, what masking fluid is that when you use acrylics or acrylics or watercolor, you use masking fluid to cover the part of the paper that you don't want the color to basically affect. Because in watercolors or with acrylic style painting, what your beginning process is, you paint from the lightest light to the darkest. So the lightest light being white, you want to cover that up with masking fluid, or your, in this case, a simple tea light. I choose white, by the way, because it won't show up on the paper. And so that protects your whitest white on the piece of paper. And remember, when you're painting in oils, what you're painting with, or the first step that you're painting, is from dark to light. Okay, so remember that process if you're new to painting or creating artwork in general. So again, to recap, your tea light is really to mask or protect that lightest light. Now, by the way, I'm also wearing a hat because I really hate in my studio how the light pierces down on my eyes and it just totally mucks around with my vision and my mindset. So today I've got the hat on and I want to concentrate on what I'm doing versus squint from the light that's coming from every direction. So there's the hat on board for you. Now, let me turn you guys around to this particular little board up here, which is this one here. And as you can see, the tea light, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to haphazardly mask or create some shapes and shadows that's going to protect a layer. Okay, so nothing too particular, no particular landscape or still life, but I just want to show you what that works and how it works. Okay, so I've just rubbed that really well with the tea light. And of course, the thing that's really challenging with the tea light is that you can't tell what you've done. But if you go to the side of your piece of paper, you will start to see the shiny bits of the marks that you've made with the tea light. So that's one way that you can get around to see what you've actually done. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there and I'm going to take this board out because I want to show you a little bit closer up here what that looks like once, let me get a bit of tissue, what that looks like once we start to begin putting actual color onto that paper. By the way, the paper that I am using is Arches paper. This particular one is Arches paper. Actually, you can see that highlight there from the candle. That's really cool, haphazard synchronicity there. But yeah, the paper that I'm using is Arches paper. Of course, you can get other inexpensive paper that suits your budget. But for me personally, I love Arches and I love the way it feels when I use acrylics. So here we go. So I'm going to get black acrylic color, load my brush with nice color and water, keep it fairly light, not too thick with paint. Now watch what's going to happen as I start to put the actual color on paper. You can see the spots of where I rubbed the tea light, which is what I've protected, my lightest light, is that, you know, the acrylic's actually not going on there at all. So what it's doing, it's going on every other, or the dry part of the paper, but not where I've put or I've rubbed that tea light. And what I can do is then get my tissue paper, and if I, you know, further want to take away, can you see that way? That's better. I want to take away that color where I've put the masking fluid, or in this case I use a tea light to act as masking fluid. So that's the benefit. That's the benefit of using tea lights and or masking fluid. But again, like I've said before, tea lights are just an inexpensive way that you can create or protect your lightest light in acrylic and watercolor painting without, of course, breaking the bank if you're new at starting to create artwork. So there's a little bit of a tip for you right there. So I've already, I might just move this big box on the floor, just one sec. Now, there we go. I've already use the tea light on my big piece of paper here, and I might put it that way down there, and started already masking the sections that I want to create. So hopefully this will end up in this whole variety of shapes and different contours to produce a monochromatic landscape. Now, of course, I've done my best with the tea light candle to mark the areas that I want to protect. But like anything in art, you just never know what direction you're going to go towards up until you start painting. So I have an idea and I've created a blueprint, but once you begin, it's a different process altogether. So let's start painting. I'm going to get my big brush here, which I use a fairly large brush because the piece of paper is fairly big, and I'm going to start to see what I've marked and how this is all turning out. So let's start this process. I might just bring that a little bit closer so you guys have a better view. There we go. And let's go. So let's see how this is going to start. Now, of course, I'm going to start off with a fairly diluted acrylic color. I'm not going to make a big thick statement. So I'm just going to keep it fairly washed out. At this point, I don't want to, you know, over stimulate the tones. And you can see as I'm putting in, I hope that comes through, as I'm putting in the actual color, I mean, I can see the tea light marks that I've already made, and those particular marks are actually repelling the dark black color that I'm putting on there. So okay, so this is basically a scene in a forest that I've taken a photograph of a couple of weeks ago, and I'm hoping to reproduce that for you guys as we go along. The other thing too that I always like doing is, you know, I don't focus too much on just using one particular technique. I love to also, you know, create a couple of flickers and see how that's going to also work out. I quite like, you know, having almost, you know, haphazard marks without being too methodical on how something's going to work out. So for me personally, while I do have a plan, I don't often actually stick to that plan because I work with being in the moment and then making sure that I honor the, you know, the emotions that I experience as I'm creating versus making sure that I stick to a particular, you know, style and or ideology really. So what I'm doing now is I started off lightly, but I'm just going to maybe add, you know, a bit more of a darker tone because this is a monochromatic landscape. I just want to make sure that I mark everything so that my my trees, the different tones start to appear. Okay, there's nice color there. So what I've actually marked out and what I've protected, just have to look at the reflection, is the trunks of trees. So I want that to come out and I want that to stay quite intact. And if I run my brush alongside that, I can see that there's the tea light marks that I made. There's a base of that tree that I made. That's not going to go anywhere because that's just okay. So I'm going to go back again to my big brush, take again another diluted black color, so it's more water based than actual pigment based on my brush. And so again, go over that. And so as you see, I mean, I can see as the color's running down, it's actually repelled by, again, those tea light marks, which is quite nice. So I'm going to put a little bit more color, and again, just load a little bit more on that brush And the fact that this current broken color is being repelled by the teals, I quite like that. I mean, it's actually looking like scattered light from the canopy of the trees coming through. So I'm actually going to keep that. Add a little bit more grass in there. Okay. Again, dilute a little bit more of that pigment, and that's quite nice. I love the fact that it's running down that way. Initially, like I said, I really wanted to actually do this painting on the floor, and that's purely because I did not want this runoff. But like I said, the real benefit is these runoffs. I quite like that they're taking place, to be honest. So I'm going to continue adding a lot of this darker pigment with a lot more water so that I get some different. And I know there's a couple of canopies around here, or trees. I'm going to just mark those. I haven't added any masking fluid or tea light marks at the top, and that's purely because I'm going to focus on, you know, directing that myself. So I'm not going to be too vigorous with the brush up here. I'm just going to create very light marks to indicate that there's a big canopy up above and the more dense bushland at the bottom. So again, I'm going to continue just adding a lot more pigment, dilute it with water, and just continue to build that tonal value. Again, my focus is really all about shape more so than looking at, you know, is it a tree, is it a bird, is it a trunk? I'm quite interested in seeing how these shapes relate to one another more than wanting them to be something. My focus is never really about wanting them to be something. And at the same time too, by the way, I do focus on, you know, my reaction to this particular landscape. I'm quite interested in you know, what my connection is to the landscape and how I relate to it. That's quite important as well. Okay, so I've moved back again to a synthetic brush, which is this one here, and it's quite small. And so I've loaded that with a lot more color. And I want to denote this particular tree because I know it's in here and it's moving out that way. And there it is in that up here. Okay, so the tone next to that is quite dark, so I want the eye of the viewer to almost follow this path within the forest and lead it to this, you know, this section here. Now, just note too, because I'm using acrylics, even though I've got the tea lights that I've, you know, rubbed on this particular path here to keep that lightest light, if you do use heavy toned acrylics, you can paint over that, so it's not, you know, finite. So just be mindful of that. But certainly if you're using a washed out tones and a bit more water, then that will just run off that as well. So this is why, again, it's just learning how to control the tones and you know, what you want to create. So there's a nice, I've got grass around there. Like I said, I like these flickers. These are quite good. Okay. So again, I'm going to build up the dark tones within that tree canopy around here. They're quite nice. I like to use, again, remember I've talked in other tutorials, use the whole length of your brush. I hold it at the end. If you're holding it up here, it's just going to you know, give you too stiff of movement. You don't want a stiff, you want a flowy movement. So at the moment I'm standing quite far back, and again letting my brush do the work more so than you know, me being focused on or how it should work out. And I know I keep on harping on about that, let the brush do the work, don't focus on the detail. It really is where I think the work happens, more so than just being concerned about how something should be. That's quite nice. And you can see that, I don't know if you can, I'm hoping that comes through, the actual path of the forest is coming out. There's a nice broken tree that has fallen, that's coming that way, which I quite like. And we're going to just protect that white fallen tree there. There we go, that's quite nice. And there's one that's this way here, and that's leading the eye right above into that canopy. And again, you know, keep listening to, you know, what I'm talking about, because I'm not here telling you here's a tree, here's a, you know, trunk. I'm really just looking at always shapes. There's a nice shape this way, there's a nice dark shape there that's working quite well. So I'm going to leave that for the moment and now come back again to more diluted color. I'm switching back again to my big brush, taking a little bit more water, and again I want the I just want the different runoffs. I want the accidental marks, if you'd like, more so than so I love that, the fact that, you know, the water almost directs where the paint should go, so that's quite nice. I'm going to go back now and just switch to my round brush, and this is purely so I can make some different marks. I don't want that square one that I had before. That will just, which is the filbert, by the way. This particular one will give me a different, there we go, that's quite nice actually. We'll go back to the filbert just briefly because I need to make that quite dark. Okay. Now, the other thing too that I do use, which you guys can also incorporate into your artwork, is using art sponges. These are quite cool. I love incorporating these as well. Wet them so that they're damp but not soaked with water. Get a little bit of color on them like that, and I'll start to just, you know, add different, again, it's all about different textures, different movement. And this to me is I mean, I love dappled lights. This is why I tend to use a lot of the this sponge effect, which the brush, I can't quite get with the brush, so I tend to rely back on this. But yeah, and if you have, you know, a darker color, if it's still wet, you know, go over it with the sponge too and create that, you know, broken color. The other thing to keep in mind that when you're working with acrylics, important to keep your paper moist. So again, have a spritzer handy with water. That's going to save your life quite often. Okay, so again, go back to the sponge, and I'm just going to add within the canopy of that undergrowth of this forest, and again, just add different textures and different feels. And it really is, you know, about creating a different perspective and something that's, you know, that lets the viewer feel an energy rather than, you know, having one stroke, brush stroke, one ideology. And I truly do feel that, you know, in artwork, you have to take the viewer on that journey and give them the storyline through varied brush marks, sponge marks, etc., etc., etc. So that's quite cool to do. So I'm going to leave that for a second and just come back to, again, my filbert, dip it in water, clean it a little bit, and just grab a bit more thicker paint on it, load it, and I just want to address this particular section up here. And again, I want to increase the tonality, so make it a lot darker and take the viewer through to that path. Again, add various shapes. And as I'm painting right now, actually my eyes are squinting quite heavily. I'm focusing more again on seeing the relationship between shape, broken color, and sunlight coming through. I'm not really thinking about, does this look like anything other than how are these shapes relating to one another. Okay, so that's quite nice. Okay, again, load the brush with more color. Okay. And I'm going to go back to my big brush again, and again incorporate a bit more of a diluted tone. I've also got a little bit of white that I'm going to add to this monochromatic painting, and it's simply just to add again now a more hazy feel to the painting versus, you know, the Mars black that I'm actually using. So I'm going to add that up here, and you can, I don't know if you guys can see the delicacy of it all, but it is more of a grey tone than a dark tone. Add a bit more colour, water to that, sorry, and I'm just going to take it from this end and let it run down and see what it does. Okay. Okay, that's quite nice actually. I quite like that. Okay. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. By the way, make sure that you do have a protective mat underneath, because you will, the watercolors will run down, and you will have to clean up the mess afterwards. Now I'm going to remove that line there because I don't want it coming down that path, but I will leave that there like as it is. Okay, so there you go, guys. That was a really quick demo on doing, I'm just going to push this back, you guys can see that, and doing a monochromatic landscape using tea lights and one acrylic acrylic watercolor paint, which is quite simple. And again, to recap, all the tea lights do is to protect your lightest light in a watercolor acrylic painting. And this is really important, because remember, with watercolors you paint from your lightest light to your darkest, and if you are not protecting your lightest light in a painting, then it's not that easy to go back and retrieve it. So that's the importance of doing this. What I will say to everybody, of course, please do write in any of the questions that you have. I'd be quite curious to understand your favorite part, if this has helped you or not, what you'd like to see in the new 2018 year. Of course, I do have a lot of different projects that I'm going to bring you guys and hopefully inspire you to begin your art journey and release that art gangster within you. And if there's something that you didn't understand, by all means, please feel free to comment. I'll be more than happy to assist you. I thank you guys for tuning in. I thank you for your kindness, your joy, your respect, and grateful for your support. And by all means, remember that you are 1 out of 7 billion people. I mean, I can't begin to tell you how unique that is and how fabulous that is. So know that you are unique, and therefore express that uniqueness that is within you and begin that journey to create more of who you are. I thank you. I love you guys. I hope you enjoyed that landscape and creating the landscape using acrylic paint, and remember the good old tea light. It's an incredible tool to use and something that you'll find incredibly beneficial when you begin your art journey. Stay wonderful, stay creative, and I hope you guys have an absolutely fabulous creative week. Until next time, guys, bye.